You have something to say? Oh, look. Hello and welcome to another video on my channel. My name is Kiara, and in this video I'd like to introduce the Mini Cooper S to you. Now, the Mini Cooper S, which is standing behind me, is actually a base water model, which doesn't really mean much more other than that it was the sports model of 2012, which was when it was manufactured. Now, some information about the Mini is that it has 184 horsepower, which is pretty standard for the Cooper S. It had 84,000 kilometers on when I bought it, but this was in 2019, now it is 2023, so I've had it for actually 4 years already, and now it has 120,000 kilometers on it. I haven't changed much or anything actually about the performance, or at least about the engine performance, due to many reasons that I will talk about later. But as you can, I think, tell, it's not completely original anymore. And in this video I'd like to explain exactly what I've done to the Mini so far, and maybe also a little future look on what I'm planning to do. Because it is a base water model, it has a specific color code, which is the blue mirror and the gray mirror that you can maybe see, probably not, I'm covering it. This side of the mirror is gray, the other side is blue. I'll put in some pictures so you can see. But that is original. It was meant to be like that because it is a base water edition and it's supposed to be more sporty. And this color coding is actually the same also in the interior. It's very, very pretty in my opinion. And because of this, I wanted to accentuate this color a bit further. So I tried to at least make it more black and more blue. And you will understand this when I show you the original pictures of what the Mini looked like when I bought it. As you can see in the pictures, lots of the parts of the Mini were actually chrome colored at first, which didn't look bad, but it just wasn't really, special or anything. So what I did was quite simple. I simply blacked out all of it, except for the very front. I think you can see it here. I made these parts, they're kind of the brake air inlets, I think is what it's called. They were also chrome and I made them blue, and this was quite the hassle because I wanted to match the color with the blue mirror cap. And I asked all of BMW, I emailed them, I phoned with them, with all kinds of people, and nobody knows what the color code is for this blue color. So eventually I went to this guy in Innsbruck who does paint, and I showed him the mirror and he'd analyzed the color and was able to replicate the color as spray paint for me. And with that spray paint, I painted these brake inlet surrounds, I suppose, which is why they're nice and blue now. However, they're not that nice looking anymore because paint on chrome usually doesn't really last long, and I can see it cracking already, so I'm going to remove that paint and wrap it instead in the future. I did these color changes all around the car. You can see also the belt line is blue. It's no longer chrome as it was in the beginning. Also the light surrounds are blacked out. The boot handle is blacked out. Most of the things that I could change and make it non-chrome I did. Even the side scuttles, which are where the turn signals are on, I've also blacked them out. The door handles were chrome, which I also blacked out. I've even changed the logo from the original Mini logo to the new original Mini logo that is put on the F56. So apart from blacking out everything and repainting other things, I've also added a brand new spoiler, which was actually supposed to be originally from a different kind of Mini, from a JCW Mini. So it is in a way kind of original, at least the look is original, not on this model, but on another model, which is how I somehow got it legalized. The very next thing I did, no, that's too loud, man. Let's just wait for a second. Do you like my microphone? It's cute, isn't it? Okay. Helicopter is around today. The very next thing I did was actually something that was supposed to be better for performance, but really wasn't. As I was still very much a rookie, I thought it would improve the driving experience, but it didn't. I installed HR lowering springs, which took me a lot of work, and the ride was much lower, so it was more aesthetically pleasing, I suppose, but at the same time the performance was just horrible because of it. I could not take the corners better as I thought I would be able to, and I really just struggled with the car being very low, especially for garages and such. It was quite low. So in hindsight, this was not really the best thing I could have done, but it was part of the experience of getting to know the car, getting to know working on cars especially, and I'm still glad I did it. Originally, the Mini Basewater had very special wheels that were made just for this edition, and they looked quite nice, but they weren't badass, and they were only 16-inch, which I didn't like much. So I switched to these Dots Rapier, I think is what is pronounced, which were 17-inch wheels, still good enough to get good performance out of it. I originally drove the tires that were just on it for a while. I think they were some kind of Hankook Ventus. But eventually I tore them. I just had one huge split on the inside of the tire, which meant, of course, I could not drive it. And unfortunately, it was on a day on which I had an autocross race. And it was just in the morning as I was driving there when I realized, oh, wait a minute, there is no pressure on my tire. So I couldn't participate in that autocross. And from there on, I did quite some research on what semi-slick tire could I get that was street legal in Austria, but was also going to provide quite some good grip, especially in these turns of the Austrian Alps. And I decided on these Federal tires. They're called 595 RSR, I think. They're not very well known, but they are street legal and they're very good semi-slicks. Also, they were relatively affordable, so I was super happy to have found them. Another thing that I changed relatively early on was actually the exhaust. And some people will know this probably if you're in the Mini community, but the JCW exhaust is pretty much the same as the one that is on the Mini Cooper S, except it's larger. And because of that, it's kind of just plug and play to put it on a Mini Cooper S, which is what I did. It's kind of a trick to make the exhaust sound of the Mini Cooper S sound better. And that is what I did. I just got the exhaust of someone else that had a JCW that wanted to change theirs, and I put it on the Mini Cooper S. And you can see what it looks like. I'll put some pictures over what the original Mini Cooper S's exhaust looks like and what it looks like now. Now, it was a little bit difficult to get this legalized for the very obvious reason that, well, it's not completely legal to do this, but because it is officially an original Mini part, it says Mini on the part, I was able to get it legalized. So yeah. Pretty much around the same time, I think, or maybe even a bit earlier, I also changed the brake discs and the brake pads for a different brand because the original Mini brakes were not quite as good as I had expected, I suppose. I don't know. But my Mini friends who were doing autocross really suggested I get some other brand of brakes because in autocross especially, you need really good brakes. So I chose the Brembo brakes, which are very well known. It's known to be a good brand, so I figured why the hell not. But at this point, I realized it's not really the best. It's good, but it's not amazing. And also, it doesn't really look that nice anymore because it gets, of course, rusty since it is not ceramic. So maybe in the future, one day, I will be able to afford ceramic brakes. After these changes came the time when the Mini actually became a little bit less reliable, as I think at this time it had around 100,000 kilometers, which is in theory not really that much. However, it's also the time in which a petrol car, a petrol engine, usually starts to experience issues, especially Mini issues. And that is exactly what happened to me, unfortunately. I had a huge oil leak one day while I was driving off the Autobahn, the motorway in Austria. I had an enormous amount of pressure loss in the engine, and I had not noticed because I didn't have any gauge, any tool that told me the temperature of the oil or the pressure of the oil whatsoever, not even the water temperature, because Mini just does not provide that information for you. And I got it fixed eventually. It was not a huge issue. It was a little plastic part that kind of, I suppose, just flew out of the engine block down below somewhere. It's a common issue with Mini, but it's not really communicated much, so I thought everything was gone, was a goner, but luckily it wasn't that big of an issue. However, this was definitely a reason for me to do something about the issue of not being able to see the oil temperature or the oil pressure or anything like that. So what I got was a gauge that would tell me at least the oil temperature very specifically, and to do that, I figured the best way to get the correct oil temperature, or at least one of the hottest parts of the oil temperature, is in the filter housing. So I got this aluminium housing at which I could put a sensor, which would then read the data quite well. And I've been super happy with it. It's a great help knowing that your oil is getting really hot when you're somewhere on a mountain pass on a hot day and you realize, oh, it's above 115 degrees Celsius, then you know, okay, you need to take a short break, depending on which oil, of course, you drive. But for me, it's a great help. I'm really glad I've done it. And I even had a friend help me 3D print the gauge mount that I'm using. Yeah, it's become kind of an individual thing. It looks quite nice, I think, but also the most important thing is it really provides me very important information about it. So yeah. After these installations, it actually took quite some time before I did anything else again to the Mini, due to the fact that it's a Mini, basically. I ended up having a whole bunch of issues with not only the oil, but also water leaks. I had cooling liquid leaks for, I think, more than a year. And finally, at some point, after having removed and changed the thermostat housing and a whole bunch of other things, we found that it was in fact the water pump, which was then changed, and now it's no longer leaking any cooling liquid. I just had so many issues with the Mini leaking some kind of liquid. It really does its name proud. As many people would say, only a British car leaks some kind of liquid all the time. Now I'm finally at a point where it's not leaking any liquid anymore. But a couple of months ago it was quite different, because even though the cooling liquid issue and the oil issue were solved, it suddenly had these little drops beside the tires, which I couldn't wash away. I had thought at first maybe it's just dirty water, because it was in the winter and we get lots of salt here on the streets. So I thought maybe it was just really dirty water or something. However, it was not, because at that same time I had to bring it to the garage for the annual checkup that we have to do in Austria, and they told me that in fact the suspension was leaking oil, which is an issue, because that means that basically a part of it was broken and needed to be replaced. And in that moment I thought, but wait a minute, if I have to change both, by the way, it was both fronts, if I have to change these two, then I might as well do an upgrade, right? So I ended up buying a KW version 2 suspension as a full replacement for the entire suspension, because I had been wanting to do this for years, but I didn't quite just, have the courage to spend that kind of money while it was perfectly fine. I was super, super happy to make this change, and now I've been driving the suspension for I think 3 months now, and it's made such a big difference. It's amazing. Driving on the roads, driving on these really steep, nice turns. You want something to say? You have something to say? Oh, look. Okay, so yeah, that's what I've done so far, what has happened so far. At this point, the Mini is performance-wise, the engine is the same as it was when I had it, but the suspension and the tires, in my opinion, really make a huge difference as to how well I can drive it on the roads. Now, finally, there's one question that stays open, which is, why haven't I done more to the engine? Or why haven't I done more? Well, I don't know, why didn't I change the turbo? Why didn't I put a bigger turbo in? Basically, it's because in Austria, the legal system is relatively difficult. It's quite difficult to get things registered on the vehicle because you have to, any changes you make, you have to register to the car. And one, that can be really expensive. And two, you can't do that with every part. You can only register certain parts that have certain certifications and such, which is what makes it even more difficult to tune any cars and to make them perform better. Now, that wasn't really all that I've done to the Mini or that has happened in the past couple of years. However, it's pretty much the most important stuff, and I think you get the picture that I've been busy with it, and I look forward to having a bigger budget in the future, as I'm no longer a student as of pretty much in 2 weeks, I think. And then I'll be able to afford more fun stuff and also create more content. So that's about it for me for this video. And now there's just going to be one more nice little edit at the end of the video to show some appreciation for the Mini. Okay, bye!
Sing, turn it down, fuck it down, come down.